Language of sustainability in the environment. According to Lakoff, hypocognition is the lack of ideas that we need. We are suffering from massive hypocognition in the case of the environment. So let's just consider why this might be. And let's look at the example of ecocide in particular and the role it might play in moving forward. Now, in this presentation, I have included some really disturbing images, so I'm going to warn you about that ahead of time. Um, if you just want to listen to my voice, that's fine as well. I respect that. So I've asked you to read an article about ecocide, the history of the term ecocide, and how it's evolving to this day. So the term itself, I want to dissect that a little bit, because if we talk about environmental destruction, it can be very difficult to imagine what that looks like. Or even if we imagine it, perhaps we have in our mind, I don't know, a picture of the Alberta oil sands, since that's close to home. Or maybe we have a picture of a burning rainforest. All that feels so far away. It feels so distant from us. It doesn't feel like, ah, yes, it feels like it matters, but it feels like it matters in a very disconnected way. So, what ecocide does is it attempts to use the cognitive frames that we all have in relation to genocide and transfer those frames to the crime of environmental destruction. So, we all have uh, images in our mind that we associate with um, with genocide. This particular image is from the Rwandan genocide, and maybe you have an image like this in your mind, or maybe it's an image from the Holocaust during World War II, or some other genocide. Um, these images hold a, a lot of power in our minds. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the history of ecocide. And again, I haven't chosen the most disturbing images that I could have, but I have chosen some disturbing images. And so please just be prepared for that. Some of these are difficult to look at. So the concept of ecocide began to emerge in the final years of the Vietnam War, when the scars of that war were more than evident and were having a devastating effect on the territory. Attacks with Agent Orange, a powerful herbicide used as a chemical weapon by the US Army, killed hundreds of thousands of people and left millions of acres of land barren. So this was just truly devastating, not just for the environment, but for the humans living there and for the children that were born later. Um, this was a tragedy, a terrible tragedy. Yet, we don't really think about it that much these days. But there are still people in Vietnam who are living with the consequences of the U.S.'s use of Agent Orange to defoliate vast forests. So, ecocide or environmental destruction isn't just something that's over there, that's far away, that doesn't affect us. Um, it is truly a crime against many species, against the ecosystems that we all rely upon, against the innocence of um, the people that are usually not the perpetrators of the violence against the land. And so we do have this sense that environmental destruction is somewhere else, but perhaps the term ecosystem can bring it a little bit more home to us. The first time the world heard the word ecocide was at the 1972 UN Environmental Summit in Stockholm. Palm, the Swedish Prime Minister, accused the United States of ecocide for its practices in Vietnam. Representatives of other countries suggested at the time that the destruction of the ecosystems should be considered a crime against humanity. Although ecocide was coined in 1972, we've not seen its widespread use until recently, and then I would say only sort of, really. Yet it's a significant concept that addresses ongoing problems. I would suggest that we have a cognitive bias that makes it difficult for a weighty word such as ecocide to become widespread because, as George Lakoff writes, terms that address environmental problems are intimately tied up with other issues such as economics, energy, food, health, trade, and security. Again, another quite disturbing image. So, in these overlap areas, our citizens, as well as our leaders, policymakers, and journalists, simply lack frames that capture the reality of the situation. Lack frames and often don't wish to create uncomfortable frames as well. I think that that is only beginning to change as we become more aware of these issues and really all of us become more personally affected by these issues. It becomes harder to ignore. It becomes harder to dissociate. Conversely, terms can frame issues in ways that further disconnect humans from their environment. As George Monbiot writes, words can shape and reinforce a worldview, making it hard for us to see an issue differently. Resource extraction is one of these terms. It has a squeaky, sanitized connotation with little relation to what it is. Well, what is it? Well, it's many things. It's the removal of minerals or perhaps ancient carbonized organisms from the earth, or perhaps it's the cutting down of vast forests in ways that are often unsustainable and come with unintended consequences. Um, we've seen some really problematic forestry practices. Uh, well, we think of it in relation to BC, but other provinces as well. Certainly, we see problems with now massive landslides in areas that have been clear cut, problems with topsoil. We have problems with the loss of old growth forests, which are incredible carbon sinks in the way that new forests, newly planted forests, can never hope to be, or at least can't hope to be in our lifetimes. They have a resilience that new forests lack, and they often host much greater biodiversity than new forests do. So, you know, um, resource extraction, let's just say particularly in Alberta, has been associated with things like jobs and even identity for people. So often we focus on the positive frames when we have this kind of sanitized terminology that doesn't really connect any dots for us. For the majority of my life, the pump jack has been associated with economic prosperity. And this photo that I'm showing you, this kind of romanticized vision of, the pump jack on the vast prairie horizon. How many of you have seen a photo like this one? I've taken photos like this in the past, although this isn't my image. I got this off the internet. I couldn't find any of my old pump jack photos. But it's only recently that, because of the orphan well situation being so much in the news, that we've begun to associate these pump jacks and oil wells, prairie oil wells, with potential economic decline, debt, cleanup cost, corruption, billions of dollars in liability, betrayal by industry and government. So this first image was an image that came up when I typed in Alberta pump jack. This image came up when I typed in orphan wells in Alberta. So you can see that the frames are perhaps slowly changing. Um, so I want you to be thinking about our associations and our frames as you do the discussion forum and as you read that article that I've asked you to dig into.